week's episode of Seraph of the End, Vampire Reign. The vampire wars have finally begun, and one of mankind's last strongholds has just become a war zone. This week's episode was the perfect action anime package, just from beginning to end, an incredibly entertaining episode, and my favorite episode of Seraph of the End thus far. And I really love when a series can make me keep saying that. It just shows that they just keep upping the ante in terms of the action, the production value, and even some of the characterization. This week, we get to not only learn a little bit more about Mika and how he became a vampire, and how he seems to have this weird, freaky, symbiotic relationship with Cruel Tepes, but we also just get a lot of action. A lot of the Imperial Demon Army fighting against vampires, you and his group using their abilities. The opening scene in particular, like the opening 8 minutes, are fan-frickin-tastic. And they're also really disturbing and somewhat evocative of terrorist attacks. There's some imagery in this week's episode which might be very disturbing for some, and it definitely reminds me of 9/11. I hate to say that, but it does, especially with the scene at the beginning where the vampires use this massive airplane and ram it right into this massive wall. This way the vampires can just pour into the base like the frickin' plague. The scene here was just really messed up. The frickin' helicopters just fly in, start shooting missiles all over the place, and this leads to this amazing battle on a rooftop between all of these vampires, the demon army, and frickin' Yu's group. The animation here, holy crap. Definitely one of the best scenes from the show. They go around to each member, and they're all doing something awesome. Fluid, destroying vampires, cutting them in half, decapitating them. And is it just me, or is Yoichi badass in this week's episode? Like, more so than he has ever been. He has gone through a massive transformation, and he is just destroying everything with his demon arrows. This week's episode's action is on frickin' point. The other reason I really liked this episode is that we get to see more of Gurren's squad. These guys are a ragtag team of badasses. I especially love Mito. Mito is love. Mito is life. Her introduction is amazing, how she just shows up out of nowhere and punches this vampire, and she seems to have these gauntlets which have these guns built into them, or some sort of explosive effect, and it's awesome. I love her. Gurren and his team are getting ready to take down the commander vampire, and this eventually leads to an amazing confrontation between Mika and Gurren. And speaking of Mika, in this week's episode we get to learn a little bit more about how he consumes blood and what his relationship is with Cruel Tepes. Now, originally, I felt that maybe Cruel, actually had, some sort of, love relationship with him. Maybe she was just attracted to him for some reason. No, it's actually not that whatsoever. She literally sees Mika as a dog and treats him as such. And she tries to offer him blood by giving him a child. That doesn't frickin' work, so she ends up just cutting her wrists, pouring it into a cup. That doesn't work, and then he just grabs her arm and starts sucking on it. It's a really disturbing scene to show how far he went to that desperation. And I'm really still not quite sure how he fully, feels about Cruel Tepes. I really want to see more of how, their relationship developed as the series went on. I think that's a really interesting element of the show. And he actually has, this, pouch that he wears that has all of these, little vials, which are filled with her blood, and that's actually what he survives on. They made it seem like maybe he was going to start sucking the blood of the dead soldiers, but that immediately went away when you learned how he's going to do things. He's got 10 days worth of this stuff, so I can't wait to see what's going to happen with Mika, if he's going to fight against Gurren or the other members of his squad, or if Yu are suddenly going to show up. And speaking of Yu and his group, they end up getting into some big trouble at the end of the episode, because they're in the middle of this car, they're getting ready to go to the front lines, and they're taking these weird experimental drugs which are supposed to somehow sync them better with their cursed demon weapons, but they do have a side effect. If you take too many of them, you're pretty much going to die. So they can only take one at a time. I'm sure there's going to be that moment where someone takes 2 or 3 and they probably survive. I'm waiting for that. Very shonen-esque. Otherwise, the scene is also kind of funny because of just how bubbly and excited Shinoa is during this entire scene. Even with all this crazy shit going on, the smiles never leave her face. That is until the big explosion happens and they all end up being separated underground with Shinoa and Yu and that other corporal guy having to be stuck together. So we're going to have to see what's going to happen to them. There's still lots of action, and this week's episode was freaking awesome. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Seraph of the End? More of this, please. This was definitely what I was wanting to see more than anything. This is what post-apocalyptic vampire future should be. It shouldn't be a high school setting. It should be a constant war zone. And I gotta say, it's a complete surprise to see vampires using modern weapons like these big giant airplanes and helicopters. It's really cool, and it sort of like mixes up the whole vampire mythos. These are not your typical vampires whatsoever. The opening action scene was probably my favorite part of the episode, just how fluid it was animated and how they focused on every character and how they all got to do something really awesome. So if you have a favorite character from the series, you're probably really going to like this episode because they all get to do something awesome. And like I said, Yoichi, he's awesome. He's taking down helicopters this week and doing all types of crazy stuff. He's really come a long way and seems to be very calm on the battlefield. Either that or they just don't want to give him that much dialogue. Otherwise, the other stuff that was great is getting some Mika backstory. All this stuff with Cruel Tempest was very appreciated. I just want to learn more about them. Like, I want to see more of their development in the past, like what their real relationship is like. Because aside from the, meeting for the first time and then drinking the blood, we've really seen no other interaction between those two characters. But you're going to forget about that entirely next week when you see Gurren and their squad fighting against Mika. And I'm assuming his buddy Farad's just going to jump in and probably start fighting as well. But I want to see more of the squad in action. They all seem really awesome. They have their own distinct designs. I don't remember all of their names. There's that one older looking fellow who seems to have that one weird cloak. He seems like he's one of the older looking members of the group. There's the other female character. I think her name was Shigure. I think that's what he said her name was. She seems like the reconnaissance girl, and she was actually shown a few episodes ago, just sort of like watching everything, so she might be a little more important just because they teased her earlier on. On the technical side of things, like I said, this week's episode looked really nice, really fluid, lots of great action, lots of great explosions. It was just a really well done, ridiculous, crazy episode. I also really liked the artwork, the music cues were good, and the voice acting, as always, was pretty appropriate. The character designs are awesome, especially from Gurren's squad. I can't wait to see them in action and what all their cool, gimmicky powers are going to be. All I know is I was really excited by this episode, so I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I can't wait to see the next one. I'm really excited to see what else Seraph of the End is going to do, because it's, again, nothing too groundbreaking, but it is just damned fun to watch. So check it out, guys. Really great episode. I like this one a lot, but what about you? Did you like this week's episode of Seraph of the End? Did you like all the action? Did you have a favorite character who showed up? What do you think is going to happen in the big battle between Mika and Gurren? Do you think it's going to get interrupted, or do you think they are going to fight? And what do you want to see from the rest of Seraph of the End, Vampire Reign? Please tell me in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching my review. Make sure to like it and share it with all of your friends, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. That way you can see all of our latest anime and manga reviews. You guys can also follow us on social media, and you should definitely check out our weekly podcast show, The Powerful Nerdcast. Both Christian and I do it, and it's really fun. We talk about a lot of cool stuff, so check it out. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.